after morning. Welcome back to Alright, What's Next? Today we're going to work on trying to make some coasters. I want to make wood and epoxy resin combo posters like you see, coasters, like the riverbed tables and that you see. I want to make coasters out of that, but I want to be able to make something that I can batch them out, make multiple ones over and over and over again. Anytime you work with resin, you always have to have a form so you can pour the resin in so it doesn't just flow everywhere. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to work on trying to make a mold that we can use to repeatedly make coaster after coaster after coaster. They're going to be roughly this size. I've got these coasters. Buddy of mine made these. They're Jaws themed from one of the best freaking scenes in the movie when Quint crushes the freaking the beer can, and then shit, I can't think of his name right now. I'm ashamed of myself. I can't think of his name right now. It'll come to me. But then he crushes the freaking styrofoam cup. This is just like a great freaking scene in the movie. But I've got these. These are going to be my size reference. They are 3 3/4 inch squares. We're going to make a mold that is, we're probably going to go with 4-inch square for a mold. That way we can adjust the size to our liking. We can get in there and grind off the edges. We can round the edges, leave them square, do whatever the hell we feel like doing. That way we've got just a universal mold to make whatever size that we want to make. Plus I have cork to go on the bottom of it that comes in 4-inch squares. That way I don't have to trim them as much if I make 4-inch square freaking molds. We're going to take this board right here. This is just a cheap piece of freaking scrap pine that I had laying around from another project. See, it's cheap pine. And we're going to run it through the mill. We're going to grind it down much thinner. That fucking hurt. I haven't been in martial arts in a long time. I'm not used to that. We want to thin this down a bit because we don't want this thick of a freaking board for making the mold, because it's just going to waste a whole hell of a lot of silicone rubber when our goal is to wind up with a coaster like that. Oh, and to disregard my precariously balanced pile of toolboxes that I have over there, I have a very thin sheet of ash that I resawed off of a thick board, and after I resawed it, it took on this bow. It's more warped than my sense of humor. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to run over and I'm going to freaking try and plane this up, get this thinned down to probably about 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to make a mold. Alright, so I got my little block of wood that I'm going to use as my mold. I ripped it to width, and then I put it on my miter gauge and cut it to its final dimension. And of course, I royally screwed up and I cut the 4-inch block out of the side that I wasn't supposed to cut it off of because it was missing a chunk out of it. But that's alright. We'll go ahead and we'll fill this in with hot glue, and we'll use that down below, because this will be the it'll be a reverse image of this once we make the mold. So it's alright. It'll still work. It wouldn't be one of my builds if I didn't royally fuck something up. So now we need to make something to encase my silicone rubber stuff. I'm just about out of this freaking kit. This stuff has a short shelf life. I opened it up the other day and it's starting to go. It starts to harden up. There should be more than enough left over in this kit to do this. This is Smooth On brand, I think, is the manufacturer. It's OOMOO freaking fast curing silicone pourable rubber. Got it off of Amazon. I don't know. I think this kit, that stuff right there, I think it costs like $35 for this kit. And if you're one of the 5 people that watch my videos, You can get a freaking ton of molds out of this thing. I've made a lot of shit out of this one freaking kit. All right, so we need to make an enclosure to put this in to make a mold out of. I got a bunch of leftover acrylic sheets. I think that will probably work. Do I want to use acrylic sheets or do I want to use something else? Because sure as shit I'm going to use that and then I'm going to come up with another idea. And it's like, God damn it, why in the hell did I use that acrylic sheet? Fuck it, we'll use the acrylic sheet. We need to make an enclosure for this. Now, we probably want 1/4 inch walls. So, I'm thinking, so I guess we make this, make a 4.5 inch square out of this thing. Then take it over to the table saw. Well, I'll probably just use the bandsaw because it doesn't have to be wholly accurate, just as long as we can glue it together, and then any gaps that we've got we'll just fill up with the rubber cement, or not rubber cement, that's the stuff you sniff. Hot glue. Hot glue is what we'll use. And I lost my frickin' Sharpie. It's probably laying on the floor at work. So we need, let's see, that's going to be 4 inch. We want 1/4 inch freaking thickness walls. And we need a 4.5 inch strip. All right, so table saw, fantastically stupid idea. My table saw, I shouldn't say my table saw, it's a loaner table saw, has a gap underneath the fence that is just freaking high enough that went underneath, and when it went underneath, it bound it and freaking busted. So yeah, it kind of shattered that. So I just ripped the strips out on the bandsaw. So we'll go ahead and lay this out here. We don't have to be extremely perfect because we will just fill in all the gaps with rubber cement. Okay, there is our basic freaking mold, and you know it's gappy as shit, but you know who cares? We're gonna fill it in with some hot glue. We'll seal this up nice and tight. Let that super glue fully freaking set up. All right, I think the hot glue is good and gooey. Let's go ahead and see if we can fill in these here. Alright, so now we need to put this in there centered. We're going to use some hot glue. I got a chunk taken out of it right there. We're going to just kind of fill that in with a little bit of hot glue. It doesn't have to be perfect because this thing is bigger than final size. The mold is going to allow us some adjustment to the size of our overall coaster design. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, and you're supposed to pre-stir this stuff. If you're going to mix this stuff, I would recommend having the clear solo cups because you can see on the sides what hasn't been mixed and what has. And there will be differentiations in color. You want to really scrape the sides down. I don't know why I talk during these processes. Could I go and edit this? And I edit out generally everything that I fucking say. Alright, that looks good. Here's the moment of truth. Let's go ahead and fill up these side channels. Oh yeah, we'll have enough. Alright, so it has had 24 hours to cure. This stuff is supposed to cure in like 75 minutes, but I still would rather wait overnight. Let's see if we can actually get this out of here without screwing up the form, because I would like to reuse the form if this all turns out good. I can make more of these molds then. Oh, don't fucking rip. It was so close. It freaking leached in underneath on this one side. Yeah, I just broke goddamn mold. I'm gonna have to fucking peel this one side off in order to save this. It's alright, we can glue that back together. Alright. There we go. We got a mold. Now I got a little bit of a tear there trying to get it out. A little bit of a tear right there trying to get it out. Ain't no big deal. Now, I think I probably should have put it in the pressure pot. I don't know if it would have made a difference, but there are some air pockets in there. Once again, that's not going to be a big deal either because we can do some sanding once we're freaking finished. So now what we got, I have a very thin sheet of ash. This was a 3/4 inch thick plank, and resawed it. Took it over to my dad's house because he actually has a real bandsaw. He's got a Rikon 14-inch friggin' bandsaw. Used his and resawed it. Now it took on a warp. And if you look at it, it's still got a little bit of a warp. It's not bad. I've had it under pressure for a week. Before it was literally a freaking dome. This we can work with because we're going to cut out 4-inch squares, and then we're going to cut them 4-inch squares into smaller pieces that'll go into here. So let me take this over to the finger cutter offer thing over there, a table saw, and I'm going to cut a 4-inch square. Well, it's still got just a little bit of a tweaky to it. That's all right. So now what we're going to do, get the hot glue gun out. Now, since we're going to make this a riverbed, we want to determine how we want to set up our frickin' alright, so I don't know how you can see that, but I'm going to take and cut that pattern out, get rid of that piece, and then that's going to get filled with resin. You know, I don't think I need the freaking hot glue gun. Alright, now we need to mix up some resin. I think what we're going to do is we're going to, we got this stuff called Magic Blue. It's a white resin, but it's got like pearlescent or blue pearlescent in there. So that might be kind of cool. We'll make a small amount in there to give a swirl pattern to it. So now she goes in the pressure pot overnight. Alright, so I got my first coaster out of the mold. And it didn't turn out freaking perfect like I was kind of expecting this one to actually turn out way worse than it did. Like, you seen, I had the zip ties on here because I was so concerned about these little cracks in my mold that all my resin was going to come pouring out. So I was trying to seal it up with them zip ties. And I cut the ends off the zip tie. And when I did, the freaking zip ties came off. I tried to put new zip ties on there to freaking reseal it, and it distorted the mold, and the board shifted in here, and everything was just absolutely going to hell. I got real close to actually just throwing it across the shop and making a terrible mess of resin all over the place. But I went ahead and I just shoved the freaking boards back down in where they needed to go, or at least where I felt like they needed to go, and went ahead and put it in the pressure pot with no zip ties on there, nothing on there. The boards did float and move slightly in the resin. So this is not going to turn out to be the 4x4 exact, because I've got resin down along this edge here that I'm going to have to grind off.
cut off. There's resin up here that needs to be removed. So the board's shifted in away from the edge of the mold. So it's not a huge big deal. So, you know, instead of being 4x4, it's going to be, you know, 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 or whatever. Way too much resin. I use way more resin than I should have. So there's a ton of freaking sanding I got to do to get this back down to be able to actually see the wood, especially on this top side. You can see it through on this side. But so what we're going to do, we're going to sand this down. We're going to trim these edges up, and then we'll move on to the next step. To sand this thing, because it's going to wind up so thin, you need something to hold on to. So I think I'm going to take this block of wood, and we're just going to double side tape it down so you got something to hold on to, because my fingernails do need trimmed, but I don't want to remove them on the belt sander. Now I got my Gorilla Tape. Okay, got both sides freaking sanded. Now I'm going to take it over to the table saw and I'm going to square this thing up, get rid of these edge pieces and that, and then we can do some final sanding on it to get rid of the worst of the freaking scratches out of it, and then we'll move on to the final stage of making this. Got her sanded down pretty good. You wet it down, you see what it kind of looked like in its finished state. I think that's going to be good enough freaking sanding, because the next stage we're going to seal this. We're going to put more resin on it, and the more resin will bring it back up to that shine where you don't have to polish it. All right, so the next thing we got to do is mix up a very small batch of clear resin, and then we're going to pour it over top of this. Now we got to put it up on something that it can set on and let it run off, and we need to be able to have access to the bottom side of it after a few hours, and I'll show you that. The important part about this is it's got to be extremely level, because resin's self-leveling. So if you've got this at just the slightest tilt, you're going to have thicker resin on one side than the other. And you know, if you're not perfect, it's not going to be that big of a freaking deal. But if you're way off, you're going to have exposed wood on one side. And you know what? I need to get a piece of double-sided tape. Get that tape down before I freaking move on and get ahead of myself. And all right, that's stuck on there. Now let's mix some resin. All right, we're pretty well freaking spot on level both directions now. All right, we got our resin. We got a nice flat freaking stiff bladed putty knife. You want the end to be clean. I mean, this thing's a mess, but the actual end scraping portion of it is nice and clean. And you just take the resin, make sure there's no dust on the freaking top of that. On there, and then just kind of work from the center out. You don't have to be perfect, because like I said, this shit's going to be self-leveling. It's going to go wherever it needs to go, and it's going to make a mess, so make sure you got something underneath of it. I like to make sure I get some resin scraped up onto the sides, make sure all the outer edges have a coating on it. We got a nice even coating on there. Since we can't put it in the pressure pot to get rid of bubbles, propane torch. You just do a quick wave over top of it, look at it, and this will pop all the little bubbles that are Alright, so it's been about 2.5 hours. This thing's been sitting here freaking dripping, and it is no longer dripping. It has a bunch of little blobs up underneath it. I'm sure you can't see on this shitty camera. But if you freaking go up underneath and touch the blob, pull on it, and it's just stringy, goopy crap, it's no longer going to drip. It has self-leveled. So now we just have to remove all these, all the blobs that are underneath of it. And all we're going to do, freaking sharp-bladed, hard freaking putty knife. You just come up underneath of it. Scrape it off. There. Now all the freaking overspill, freaking bubbles and all that crap is gone. There isn't going to be any more dripping. It has set up more than enough. It's no longer going to be running off of there. So now you just got to wait till tomorrow for it to fully cure. Then we can put the cork. Put the cork on the bottom of it, and we can call this project done. See you tomorrow. All right. So it has been 24 hours since we put the top coat of resin on here. We can pop that off of there, and then we're going to put a cork freaking board on the underside of it. Now, cork, I got this, it's a 36 count freaking pack of very thin sheets of cork with a self-adhesive backing on it. Off of Amazon, it was $8.50 plus tax. It was under $10. It was under $10 for this. You can get it a lot cheaper if you shop around. If you don't want to have to worry about self-adhesive, if you want to just freaking put some spray adhesives on there, you can get rolls of this stuff for like really freaking cheap. But I just went for the convenience that it was already adhesive. All right, that is finished. All right. There we go. I really freaking dig it. I think it's freaking cool as shit. There are a couple issues with it because I poured resin out here in the shop when it was freaking too cold to be pouring resin. It's only 58, 60 degrees in here. You should have probably 75 degrees to actually be doing the seal coat pour, because it won't level properly. So I have some imperfections to it. There's an area here that didn't flow into. There's an area over here that didn't flow into. It will perform a hell of a lot better if it's freaking warm. I'm really happy with how it looks. The resin turned out freaking great. It's great that if you do that seal coat over top of it, you don't have to worry about really getting aggressive with sanding. You don't have to go freaking, to 12,000 grit to get a nice polish on there. Because resin is kind of, what do you say, like self-healing. You pour a new coat of resin over top of a scratched up shit freaking surface of resin, it brings it back to a shine. It fills in all them little imperfections in there. It makes it look freaking good again. And then with that white that I put in with the blue, it gives it almost a look of freaking current going through there. So yeah, I am extremely happy with this. And if you like these things, I would be willing to bet a set of 4 of these things you could probably pick up $30 or so at a freaking craft fair, maybe even more. I don't know. I don't go to craft fairs. These will make great freaking presents. All right, guys. Oh, like my new patches? I got fucking patches. That's the best thing about freaking doing something like this is the swag. I like the swag. I can give a shit about everything else. I get to freaking have swag with my own logo on it. subscribe. I will see you next time.